All right, you guys, it is the top of the hour, and I want to award you guys for being here on time. And today's call is going to be with John Hyre. He's going to teach us all about building wealth with various IRA plans while avoiding so-called prohibited transactions, which are bad.
Very
And
bad.
so I'm going to ask John all kinds of questions, and what we're going to talk about the power of the IRA, the compounding of the tax-free and tax-deferred. We're going to talk about the different kinds of plans that are out there, and some of the plans I've never even heard of, like a CISA. It sounds like some kind of airplane or a disease or something. Never even heard of that. And then we're going to learn about prohibited transactions, which, by the way, I thought I knew what they were, but after talking with John a little bit and looking at some of the material, I'm like, man, I don't quite have this right. And at the end, we're going to do a Q&A about IRA plans, but anything tax specific. And John has told me that he would stay on board as long as it takes to answer all of your questions. So that's what we're going to do today. What? Oops. Did I say that? Oh, never mind. Well, we'll see how it goes. So, John, welcome to the webinar.
I'm sorry?
I said, John, welcome to the webinar.
Oh, glad to be here.
All right, sounds good. You know, you guys, you're going to be able to tell from the content today that when you listen to John, that John is very passionate about the topic of IRA and IRA investing and not paying taxes unless we have to. And but he's also going to focus on doing it right. He's successfully defended self-directed IRA cases in court, and because he's a tax attorney and a CPA, it gives him a very unique insight into both the potential of the IRA as well as some of the pitfalls. John, why don't you start a little bit about just telling a little about yourself and kind of what you do?
Sure. I'm a tax lawyer, accountant, and investor, and that's my order of competence. Most of my investing is low income and thankfully increasingly less management from me. I used to have an accounting practice that did tax returns. I sold it to a very, very excellent CPA who does real estate and IRA returns. And I now focus on both the planning and consulting side, which is probably about 80% of my practice, and about 20% of it's fighting the IRS in various capacities. And something I take a lot of pride in, I almost never lose. It's very rare. But part of it's we advise the client too. When you have a real dud case, we tell you up front, you can pay me a lot to fight. You're going to lose, but I appreciate the billable hours. It's really pretty cool. But usually clients, when I tell them, here's where you're going to settle at, here's what the IRS will give you, let's get to that as fast as we can. So when I do go to court, I usually win. The one I'm most proud of is recently, I had an IRA investor, used a self-directed IRA. We went to audit. The auditor said he owed 420 grand. So he had a pretty large IRA. We went to tax court 2 weeks before tax court. The IRS completely capitulated. He owed zero. We didn't have to go to court. It was just a huge victory. And it's the second time on self-directed IRAs I've been to tax court. Both times I've won. You probably have never met anybody who can say that. There are not a lot of people who do what I do, and especially not ones who have the actual hands-on experience. So I enjoy fighting the IRS. I hope those of you who vote the right way never have to. And those of you who vote for bigger government, well, you deserve it.
Very good. Now, you're very passionate about IRA and tax-free, tax-deferred investing.
Oh my, well, it's the biggest loophole out there, right? People talk about, how can we do this deduction? And they nickel and dime on the meals and entertainment or the travel, for example, which is great. I think we should do that. I do that. I'm not downplaying it. What I am saying is the best way to deal with income is to make it not taxable to begin with. So if you can generate more than you need and you don't need access to it, putting it in an IRA, 401k, health savings account, educational savings account, this is unbeatable. It's the #1 loophole out there. And I'll tell you more, I'll bet you Congress is going to change it. Actually, it's right. Since we last spoke, I hadn't talked to you. 2 articles came out in the last week about how Obamacare is trying to take down HSAs. So my advice would be get them set up now while you still can and get money in them while you still can. And how the new fiduciary rules that just came out, again, more regulations, no law involved. It was all regulators saying, we're making new rules for fiduciaries that coincidentally make certain types of investing harder. So get it in now is the point.
Yeah, I mean, you have a good point, especially when combined with real estate. IRA, tax-deferred or tax-free, can really grow rapidly. Can you just share some kind of an example to kind of illustrate the point so we know what we're talking about here?
Let me switch over to a slide, and hopefully this works well for you. I see a lot of people from California. Just so you know, I'm as good a lawyer as I am lousy at tech. So fair warning if I push the wrong button or something. But I want to show you an example of one of the investors that I deal with, what he did. with real estate in his IRA. It's kind of like a Reese's cup, chocolate meets peanut butter. It's perfect, sublime, and wonderful. So I know a guy in Ohio. He has over 50 rentals in his Roth, free and clear. He's over 60 now, so that income is tax-free. Bear in mind, you could also do it in a 401k. You could do it in a health savings account and pay a bunch of health bills for the rest of your life. You could do it in a Coverdale educational savings account and pay for K through 12 private tuition free, pay for college tuition free. So how did he do it? He bought low-income rentals. He got private money loans that quickly amortized. And I'm skimming very quickly for the sake of brevity and being understandable. But there were some things he had to do with those loans. They were non-recourse. So whoever borrowed on those loans, or I should say whoever lent on those loans, the lender's only means of recovery is seizing the property. You arrange that with private money. It has to be a higher rate because it's non-recourse. PT stands for prohibited transactions. We have to screen for those. We're going to talk some about that. And finally, you have to understand what UBIT, unrelated business income tax, is, aka IRA tax. The advantages to this model are simplicity and the IRS psychology. It's not gray, it's not threatening. And since you pay a little bit of tax via UBIT, the psychology is very different. They're easier to deal with. I'm going to go to the next page and give you an example. By the way, my clients' deals were better than this, right? So what I'm giving you are deals that you could find today with a little bit of looking. He did this in the crash. He was getting much better prices. So instead of amortizing loans over 8 years, he amortized over 5. But bottom line is this. He gets a rental, 27 grand. That's all in, rehab included. He borrows 100% to do that. Let's say the gross rents are $675. This kind of deal in Ohio is not that hard to find. Expense ratio, 40%. So 40% of the rent is expense. That's a very conservative number. In practice, I think you can drop that number to somewhere in the 30s, but I wanted to be conservative and realistic here. So the net rent cash flow is about $405 a month. That's $4,860 a year. You keep your cash in the Roth as a reserve. So the key is my client never used his own cash in his Roth. This was all leverage. He kept his cash as a backup to if something was empty and he needed to make a loan payment, if a rehab went over budget. Further, I had him borrow, in this example, at all 27 grand at 6.75% interest. There's an 8-year amortization period. Now, when you leverage in an IRA, you do pay tax. And the rough rule is this. The percent of leverage equals the percent of income that's taxable. So if I have, just to make up an example, $100,000 property, I put 10,000 down, I borrow 90, my leverage ratio is 90%. What does that mean? 90% of my rental income, 90% of my gain on sale will be taxed at UBIT rates. But as you amortize the loan, that number gets lower and lower till eventually the property is free and clear. Then you could sell it for no UBIT tax. In other words, completely tax-free. So a very basic explanation of UBIT. Here's a chart as to how it looks like, years 1 through 8. Your net rental income is over there at $4,860. Your loan payments are both interest and principal in there, but they're amortizing. I calculated the UBIT. I did that off screen just to keep it simple, but the UBIT's very low because with the loan payments, you're not showing a ton of income, how much cash you have at the end of the year. But here's the trick. Look at the loan balance. Look at the loan balance at the end of each year in the far right. So for 8 years, he pretty much broke even on cash flow. But at the end of 8 years, his IRA owned this rental free and clear. Now, my guy did it on a faster amortization schedule because his deals were better. And he also did it, so 5 years, better deals, did it faster, paid less UBIT. And he did it over 50 times. So let's go back to, let's see if I can get the screen share so you guys can see me. See, if Blank can teach me to do this, he's a genius.
I think I'm a genius because you're doing good.
Am I here?
Yeah, you're there. Yep.
All right. I can't see me. Wait a minute.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so here's my point. Let me recap because that was a lot to follow in a short time, but we only have so much time. He borrows on the property 100%. He keeps his IRA's money high and dry. He buys an asset that'll amortize, in his case, over 5 years. In the case example I gave, over 8 years. Once it's done amortizing, the IRA has it free and clear. That's how this guy managed to get over 50 rentals in a Roth IRA free and clear. He's over 60 now. He pays no tax on those rentals. And I'm not saying you can't do this with other things. There are other assets you could leverage up. There are other techniques. I just wanted to give you my favorite one.
Yeah, just an awesome example, you know, and you know, and you can start, even if you're 40, even 45, 50, you can start this strategy right now. And it's
Look,
like
if you're 70,
yeah, well, it's true.
If you're 70, you can do it.
I mean, you could theoretically buy one rental property per year for the next, whatever, 10 years you got, you know, it's like the perfect retirement plan.
Yep. So there are details we'll talk about. We'll get into prohibited transactions and so on, but I just wanted people to see that.
So let's talk about some of the plans. A lot of people are familiar with IRAs in general. Can you just talk about some of the difference between a Roth and a traditional IRA, and maybe, you know, do you have a recommendation for which one is better?
Okay, I'll give you start with the end part. I prefer the Roth, all things being equal. It's not always realistic for everybody because of tax bracket issues. So here's the deal. A regular Roth, you put the money in, you get a tax deduction, everything grows tax-free, and we're going to show you the power of that tax-free growth in a minute. Those are words that people underestimate. What does tax-free growth mean? We're going to show you. So you put the money in with a deduction, tax-free growth. When it comes out, it's taxable. In a Roth, you flip it around. You put the money in, no tax deduction, tax-free growth, but it comes out tax-free. And so the question I ask you is, would you rather be taxed on the seed today or the crop later? I would much rather be taxed on the seed today. Suck it up, take the hit, because that tax-free versus tax-deferred is very powerful. As to the different types of accounts, let's talk about 4 accounts. And when I'm talking about IRAs, I really mean all 4. Regular IRAs, Roth IRAs, so that's one type of account, IRAs, 401ks, which if we have time, we're going to talk about why I like self-directed 401ks way better than IRAs. If you're eligible for a 401k self-directed, you should absolutely get it. It's infinitely superior to an IRA. The other 2 accounts that people underestimate, health savings accounts. So you use it just like a Roth, except for 2 things. Unlike a Roth, you get a deduction for putting the money in, and it still comes out tax-free. So you're not taxed on the seed or the crop. And you use it for healthcare. I use it for medical tourism, for example. Sometimes I go to South America. I went and got a sinus surgery done that my insurance wouldn't cover here. I paid about 1/5 of what it would have paid in the US. I had a great relationship with the doctor. There were no insurance agents, bureaucrats, or lawyers in the room while he and I were having our medical discussion. Paid less. Frankly, got to say, the nurses were not bad either. I paid less, and then I reimbursed myself from my HSA. So I paid him cash, and then I reimbursed myself for what I paid him out of the health savings account. Totally legit, totally legal, totally tax-free. Last but not least, the Coverdale Educational Savings Account. And what that is a Roth IRA, but it's for education instead of retirement. So the account actually disbands when it's 30 unless you give it to another family member who's in school or who's going to be in school. But remember, it's not just for college. There are 2 other things it'll pay for that most people don't know. It will pay for K through 12 private school tax-free. Second, it will pay for all home computing needs tax-free while you've got a student in the house. You can pay for the computers, the printers, the ink, the utilities, the internet service, the repairs, the software. All of that can be paid through a Coverdale Educational Savings Account, which I'm going to call a CISA. And let me tell you, everyone's objection to a CISA, well, I can only put $2,000 a year in it. But we just gave you an example with the rental where $2,000 a year can get you an unlimited number of rentals if what? You can arrange private borrowing on certain terms.
Yeah, that's the CISA is something I've never even heard of, but I have heard of the HSA, where you put money into tax deductible contribution, right? And then you use that money to pay for medical expenses, essentially tax free. And so the same thing happens for educational expenses, and not just for the actual school itself, like tuition, but everything else around it, and for the entire family. I mean, that's nuts.
And let me clarify with the HSA, you can reimburse yourself. The reason you want to set up an HSA today, go online and set it up today, is you can reimburse yourself for medical expenses that occurred when the HSA existed. So the day the HSA exists, even if you only put $50 in it, you go pay personally for a bunch of medical. down the road, when the HSA has enough money, let's say you did invest in rentals or you did a few flips or whatever, it could reimburse you down the road, years later, for stuff you paid today, but it can only reimburse you for things that occurred while it existed.
I see. Yeah, and that's right. And it rolls over from year to year. It's because yeah, you can keep accruing the money.
Right. It's not an MSA. With an MSA,
Right.
it's like government budgeting. You got till the end of the year to spend it or it's gone.
Right.
The HSA goes on until you kick off.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So let's talk about your favorite, IRA plan. I think you mentioned the 401ks. What is so exciting about that particular one?
Okay, a couple things about the 401k. We're going to talk about prohibited transactions. If you have a prohibited transaction in an IRA, HSA, or CISA, it destroys the account. What we tell people is normally you should expect, if you have a prohibited transaction in an IRA, HSA, or CISA, to lose 50 to 60% of the account to the government. You get what's left over, but now it's in your personal name, not in the account, so it doesn't grow tax-free anymore. What the first thing I love about 401ks is the penalty for a prohibited transaction is only 15% of the transaction. Let me give you an example that'll illustrate it. I have a $1.6 million IRA. I lend $1 to my mother. That's a prohibited transaction. Everybody knows you can't lend money to ancestors. You can't do business. Your IRA can't do business with ancestors. So I do a $1 prohibited transaction. I have 1.6 in the IRA. 60% of that's $1 million. So can $1 cost you $1 million? Yes. And anyone who thinks the IRS hasn't done that or wouldn't do that, I got a bridge to sell you somewhere in some swampland. I mean, they have done things like that. So the tiniest little prohibited transaction blows up the whole account. So we have to be very careful and conservative about that. In fact, that's the main topic I deal with because it's such a huge issue. Now let's look at a 401k. I lend $1 to mom for less than a year because it's 15% a year. The transaction amount is $1. 15% of $1 is 15 cents. So if I have a prohibited transaction, in this case, in an IRA, I pay $1 million. In a 401k, I pay 15 cents. That alone is a reason to have the 401k. Add that the contribution limits are higher, the asset protection from outside creditors is better, you have more control directly as opposed to having to hire people to do certain functions, you can lend yourself money. The 401ks just are infinitely superior to the IRAs. And by the way, you can have both. If you qualify for a 401k, you can still qualify for an IRA and contribute to both. So that's why I like 401ks.
What's entailed in setting that up? So if someone wants to set up a 401k, what's kind of the general process for doing that?
Usually you go to an outside vendor. Is it something that the brainiacs can theoretically figure out on their own? Sure. I don't even do that, and I work in this area. There are people who will sell you both paperwork and services. Now, this is the 401k versus the IRA. See, with the IRA, you have to have a custodian or a third-party administrator, and they have to run it all, and you direct them. With a 401k, you can be the trustee of the plan, but you have to have good plan documents, some good training, and somebody to do the really heavy admin work. There are certain mathematical calculations that have to be done annually. You farm that out. Nobody does that for themselves.
Yeah, that makes sense. By the way, Anthony in chat just said, where do we resource this information? This is incredible. So thanks, Anthony. Appreciate the feedback. So John, people like what you're saying. It's these different plans are interesting to me because they can all be used on the one hand to make tax deductible contributions on the one hand, but also on the other ones, it can be used to actually own real estate and actually grow those tax-free, which is incredible. The other value to me in IRAs specifically are that I can actually raise money from other people's IRA, right? So, and to me, as a syndicator raising money for apartment buildings, I've always found that most people, I mean, like 98% of people are not even aware that you can legally actually invest your IRA or make loans from your IRA. So the idea of a self-directed IRA is completely foreign. And I found that when I educate my potential investors about this, they're amazed. And most of them have several $100,000 in their IRA, and are very eager to do something with it because it's not making any returns.
Michael, can I show you Can I show you how powerful tax-free investing is? You know I love this slide, and I've been sitting here itching just to bring it up.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So here we go. First of all, Michael gets full credit. He showed me how to not be a complete monkey when it comes to showing. Can you see the PowerPoint?
Yeah, I can see the PowerPoint. See, now you can do these things all every day of the. You don't have to travel anywhere. This is fantastic.
So yeah, this is, well, Mike was showing me how to do these various things because I'm horrible at tech. But all right, take a look at what I got up on screen. If you do one rehab a year, so it's a buy, rehab, and retail. And I'm just going to use Midwest numbers for you people in California, triple it. The initial cash is 100,000. The profit on the flip is 30,000, which is totally realistic. 30%. If you're not making 30% on these kinds of deals, you're doing something wrong. I got lots of clients who do this. I know people who teach it.
Yep.
The tax is at 35%, which could include self-employment tax, which alone is 15%. So there's your tax on the profit, 10,005, cash balance 119.5. And you carry that over to year 2, and you reinvest the money at the same rate. So as you start to get in the larger numbers, you're obviously going to be doing either larger flips with bigger, nicer properties, or you're going to be doing a larger volume. If you look over towards the right, it shows what happens when you pay no tax. Now, here's what I want you to look at. Compare the cash balance. The cash balance doing this taxable is 594K. The cash balance doing this tax-free, assuming you can sustain the volume, is 1.4 mil. Let me go to my next slide. So the amount that you pay in taxes if you don't do this through a 401k or an IRA or an HSA or CISA is 265. The total lost growth is 518 because the money that the government took from you is no longer compounding at that beautiful 30% rate. Total direct cost of thieving government, 785 G's. And this is, guys, this is a modest example. It's one deal a year over 10 years. This is nothing. You want to have some fun? Do it over 40 years. Another quick example, you do one rehab and retail per year for 7 years, and then you lend at 12%, which is not even hard money. It's aggressive, but it's not hard money. Here's what the numbers look like at the end. Cash balance taxable, 923 grand. Cash balance tax-free, 2.7 mil. Here's how it breaks down. 443 in taxes paid, 1.3 in lost growth, a 1.8 mil difference. Look, just by investing 20 years at those rates, tax-free, you divide that number, my 1.8 mil, let's say you get a 10% return on that for the rest of your life. You get real lazy, you stop with the 12% stuff. It's lending, it's not hard money, it's sort of kind of semi-hard money. 181 a year just from not paying taxes. That is the power of tax-free growth. That's why this is the most powerful thing out there and what I recommend, especially for people. Let's say you're making good W-2 money, and let's see if I can get my face back on here. I know that's probably not good for everybody, but you're going to get it anyway. Am I there?
You're there.
All right. I don't see me.
I see you.
There I am. All right. So why do I love this? You saw the numbers. This is not make up numbers. Go put an Excel spreadsheet together like the one I had. Put in your rate of return. Put in how long you think you can invest in it. For me, for example, I make plenty of money on the tax practice. I don't want more money. I don't want more tax money. My rental properties get done through my 401k and my HSA and one CISA. I got 3 kids, but I only got one CISA because one of the kids has a full ride to college. The college is actually paying her to attend. And I got another one who I think is going to be in the same boat. So I only got to worry about one of them.
That's awesome.
That's the way to invest. Why would you invest in rental properties if you're already in a high bracket outside of one of these accounts? You don't need the money.
Right. So several examples of using the IRA. One is to set up these plans to have tax deductions and then to grow them. Number 2, then to use those and actually purchase property with them. So the properties are actually titled in the name of the IRA. Number 2 is you can, in the last example, you can actually loan out through a self-directed IRA, loan it out at 12%. And you can actually raise money from others who invest with you. Now, there are some rules and guidelines. So obviously, the benefits are enormous, but there's a downside, and you hinted at it earlier with these prohibited transactions. And a lot of people know including myself, that IRA investing has to be, quote, arm's length, okay? Meaning that I can't take I can't buy a house titled in my LLC and then take my IRA and invest it in there. That's not an arm's length transaction. I can't loan it to relatives or parents or whatever. You know, I get all that. But the prohibited transaction rule, my understanding, John, is that they're actually much broader than that. And they're actually really scary. And so when I looked at some of your material, I was like, holy smokes, I wasn't aware that prohibited transaction was this. I mean, can you talk about a prohibited first of all, what it is and an example of things that most people would not think is a prohibited transaction?
All right. So we're not giving, let's do the lawyerly caveat. This is a huge category. When I analyze a client's deal, I do a lot of this. I get people pass deals to me, either that they did or they're gonna do. Now, obviously, we prefer they give me a deal they're gonna do. But sometimes they call and say, we did this. Is it wrong? Can we fix it? If not, what do we do? So I have a 10-page outline, like an if-then chart that analyzes prohibited transactions. The General Tax Counsel for one of the largest custodians out there told me it was the best analysis of prohibited transactions he ever saw. I'm going to cover a teeny little bit of that because it's a huge thing. But the two that I want to really leave with you as real estate investors that I have found speaking to audiences across the country, they miss: A, services. If you provide a service to your account, it's a prohibited transaction. And the code doesn't say if the service is free, it's okay. It says a service. It doesn't say you have to pay for it. Second, the service, there's no definition. They tell us if you provide a service to your IRA goes, it blows up. But they don't tell you what a service is. So until the court rules on it one day, we have to speculate. Because there's so much money at stake, you saw those numbers, but because one little prohibited transaction blows anything but a 401k, we're not just conservative, we're paranoid. Absolutely paranoid about avoiding prohibited transactions. So here are 3 questions I got for you. If you manage a rental inside of an IRA, could that management be viewed as a service? Could it? We don't know if it will be, but could it?
Well, wait a minute. Now, if the rental is owned by the IRA, someone's got to manage it. So you're saying if I am managing my own rental property owned by the IRA, that could be a conflict? In other words, it would be better for me to put a third-party manager in there to avoid this? Is that what you're saying?
Boom. That's what you got to do. And I understand you don't want to do it. I understand you don't want to do it. I understand it costs money, and I understand they'll never do as good a job as you. The question is the cost of them doing that worth what you're saving in terms of, remember, the numbers I showed you? I totally get it with property management. I have the same issues because I do invest in this manner. And so I have the property manager issues that I'm paying them and they don't do as good a job as I will. But is it worth it for that tax-free growth? Now, one day the court's going to clarify what's a service, we hope. But right now, the question is, could managing a property, even if you're not swinging a hammer, let's say you're just signing rental agreements and interviewing tenants, could that be viewed as a service? And let's remember, the IRS is under a lot of pressure to collect money, right? The United States is the brokest entity in the history of our race. There's never been a government more underwater. There's never been any entity more underwater. You think there's some pressure on the IRS to collect? You better believe it. Let me ask you the second question. Is acting as the general contractor on your rehab, guiding the rehab, showing up, screaming at people, pointing at stuff, going to the store to buy things, could that be a service?
So
yeah,
don't do that either.
You want to supervise as little as possible. You have an investment, you're going to direct the investment. To direct the investment, there has to be knowledge about the investment and some supervision. So you direct, others do. We're going to be very conservative, remember. The last one, let's say your IRA owns an LLC, commonly known as a checkbook LLC, and you manage that LLC for the IRA. Could that be a service? Could the IRS go to court and say, we think managing is a service, it's not just directing, and therefore that's a prohibited transaction? I think so. I'm not, maybe put it this way, I'm not risking my IRA to find out whether or not that's a service. So what do? I strongly recommend having a manager in place for your LLC. So we look for a non-disqualified party, a friend, a real estate crony that you don't partner with and meet certain other criteria. Pay them $30 an hour, pay them $40 an hour. It's probably going to be 8 to 10 hours a year. Big deal. To protect yourself from a service and your IRA completely exploding, I said I'm paranoid. I am absolutely paranoid about prohibited transactions because there's so much at stake. I don't want to screw it up. Now, hopefully down the road, the court's going to clarify what is and is not a service, but that's something we train people to deal with.
Now, what about loaning money to your contractor, for example?
Well, the contractor, see, it depends why you're lending them money, because we got another rule. Everybody knows that you can't make loans, for example. Your IRA can't do business with ancestors, descendants, your spouse. Ancestors or descendants of your spouse, for the most part. You can't do business with them. So here's what everyone says. My IRA is lending money to my brother or to my contractor. Well, there are ways for both of them to be disqualified parties. There's another rule called the indirect benefit rule. I can only use the IRA's money to benefit the IRA. If it benefits me, even indirectly, so for example, if the money benefits my uncle, is that an indirect benefit to me? The family's happy, we all get along, kumbaya. Yeah, that could be. That could be. Why take the risk? So that's what you mean by arm's length. I want to keep it arm's length. So is lending to my contractor a disqualified transaction? I'd have to know a lot more details. What's your relationship with the contractor? What's he doing for you? What's he going to use the money for? But can I find a way to show that he was using the IRA's money for a way that ultimately benefited you? So let me give you an example. Your IRA owns a condo in Florida. You shouldn't stay in it. Your wife shouldn't stay in it. Your kids shouldn't stay in it. Your boss shouldn't stay in it. Your boss shouldn't stay in it even if he pays full rent. Could the IRS argue that letting the boss stay in the condo, even though he was paying regular rent, was a benefit to you because it made him happy and you did better at work? Yeah. Now, would we win that argument? Probably we would win. Probably the IRS would lose. But who wants to have that argument?
Right.
The best argument you ever had with the IRS, especially on a high-stakes game, like blowing up your IRA, the best argument you ever had with the IRS is the argument you never had. So I'm not saying in all these cases, if you did this, you're dead. I'm saying, let's think about it. I am years ahead of the IRS. I understand the people on this call, the investors, and what they do with their IRAs far better than the IRS does. If the IRS knew what I know, we'd be in a lot of trouble. They have not yet come up with the services argument. Why am I mentioning it to you? Because they're still in the baby steps. I'm ahead of them. If I were an evil IRS lawyer, right, red lightsaber instead of blue lightsaber, I would argue services. Now, at some point, it's going to occur to them. So what do I want you guys on the call to do? Plan ahead. If you made a mistake, if you're doing services, fix it now before for the IRS it's an issue. Look and analyze, learn how to run these accounts, both more profitably on for example, the leveraged example I gave you, and there are other examples of how to really grow these IRAs, but also on the penalty side, get the belt and suspenders. The money at stake is so huge. Protect yourself. Who do you want advising you? A paranoid lawyer who's won in tax court.
Yeah, that's right. Now, if you have done a prohibited transaction of sort and it's kind of done, you said is it still possible to fix? And if so, how do you fix it?
I'm sorry, it broke up there a touch.
Now, if let's say through educating ourselves more, because this is just the tip of the iceberg with prohibited transactions, we discover that we've actually done a prohibited transaction. Is it too late to fix? And if not, how do you go about fixing it?
All right, couple thoughts on that. First, if it's a gray prohibited transaction, which most of them are, in other words, it's not clear that it is prohibited, but maybe one day our court will say it's prohibited. Like, what does the doctor say? You say, it hurts when I do this, stop doing that. So you stop doing that. The statute of limitations, and this is new law. This came out last week. I didn't think there was a statute of limitations, and a lot of lawyers didn't think there was a statute of limitations on prohibited transactions. The last time you and I spoke, there was no statute of limitations. A case just came out. The regular 1040 statute of limitations applies to prohibited transactions. And because of the mechanics of how that works, it's usually 6 years. So you've got a 6-year period to not have it looked at and lose. Now, if you have a blatant prohibited transaction, you lend money to mom, as your attorney, but not your accountant. That's important that I'm not the same guy. as your attorney, but not your accountant, I'm going to tell you, you got to follow the law and report it and narc on yourself. Now, whether or not you actually do that is your decision. And that's why it's important I'm not your accountant, because if I'm your accountant, or worse yet, your custodian, the self-directed account custodian, if they know you did a prohibited transaction, a black and white, clear cut, you're done type of thing, they will distribute the money. Now, you have to make a business decision of will you distribute or won't you. The law says you have to, and if you don't, and they catch you, they distribute and you pay penalties, which is pretty much the same thing. But I have to recommend, as a licensed lawyer, you really should follow the law and distribute if it's black and white. I just can't make you do it.
Yeah. So my lesson here from this call is, I mean, I have known about the power of the IRA, and a lot of people kind of do, though I don't know who knows about the CSIS and the HOAs and the 401k. So that's kind of, I think, new information. The thing that surprises me is that the whole thing about prohibited transactions is much broader. And in your material, you actually go through the IRS code, and there are a lot of things to consider. So my lesson is twofold. Number one is I need to educate myself better about these prohibited transactions. And number two, probably if I'm going to do a deal, that it might actually be worth to pay someone like yourself an hour of your time to review the deal and make sure that, it really isn't a prohibited transaction.
And if you don't mind, let me do some blatant, crass commercial capital advertising.
By all means.
If you're interested in a service, if you're interested in planning forward, not just with IRAs, but regular taxes, but I will say the IRAs are about 75% of my practice because there are very few people who do what I do. If you're interested in the services, give us an email. Just go to my website, iralawyer.com. It's easy to remember. Yes, for you people from California, my website is horribly primitive. I'm not a tech guy. It's designed to let you contact me, and that's pretty much it. So no, there's no Tetris. There's no games. It could all be better. I understand. But if you want to get a hold of me, that's the way to do it. I do a lot of this kind of structuring. How do you get a rental into an IRA? How do we run a flip through an IRA? How do we lend money? How do we do participating loans where the interest is measured by profit? So it could be interest, which we like for a variety of reasons, but measured by the profit on the deal I'm lending to. And a bunch of other deals. Tons of planning opportunities out there. We're skimming the surface.
Right. There's a lot to learn here, guys. And John, I appreciate you sharing this stuff. I do want you to mention also that you do have some resources. I think someone asked about the further resources. And I think you have some live events and a course that explains this more. Can you please talk about that for everybody on the audience?
Sure. Let me talk about the resources. In fact, I'm presenting a workshop in Orlando this weekend. So poor me, boo-hoo. I did a workshop last year to kind of test the water. I called it the IRA meets the NRA because we did it at a gun range. So we had classes in great detail for 2 full days on exactly this topic, on how to make the IRA grow, how to avoid the prohibited transactions. I would say about 40% of the time spent was on pure Q&A. So we present the topic, but we left a ton of time for Q&A and frankly, brainstorming, because the people I invited to this were very sharp. I invited 20 investors off of my list, very sharp people. I charged $800 a head. Everybody thought it was a bargain. Given that I go at $350 an hour, do the math, 14 hours after you calculate lunch breaks and all, about 14 hours in a fairly small group, or 2.5 hours one-on-one. You do the math. So we did this, we recorded it. So we had our IRA class during the day, great detail. And then in the afternoon, usually at 3 o'clock, we went off and started shooting. And of course it was tax deductible entertainment. So that's how you play the game. We recorded this. So that's part of the home study course. There's also a written component to the home study course. It includes my checklist for prohibited transactions. It's about 10-page diagram that follows through what are the prohibited transactions.
It's pretty extensive. I've seen it. It's like I said, it's just kind of blew my mind how much time you spend on it and how much is there. I mean, you look, as an investor, you got to know about these things because it affects your business decisions.
So, well, we sold the course separately for $797. So it was $797 for the home study course, which was a recording of the event we did in August, plus the written material. And then we sell the boot camp seats or the workshop seats for $797 each. So if you're taking 2 people, because a lot of people showed up with a business partner, a CPA, or a spouse. And maybe sometimes it was all three. I don't want to know about that. But everybody pretty much showed up with a partner. So they were paying, if you paid for all three of those things, I mean, you're looking at $2,400. We've got workshops coming up, and we'll be planning more. But we've got a workshop this weekend in Orlando, which I get that's kind of short notice. We're doing another one in Columbus, Ohio, May 14th and 15th. So Saturday, May 14th, Sunday, May 15th, Columbus, Ohio. That's probably going to be pretty heavily attended. The Orlando one is very lightly attended. I didn't market it well. Columbus will probably have 50 people. Orlando will probably have 10.
Right. And you probably have some other boot camps throughout the year. So just as this, because I'm going to have this video replay to check the schedule, let's go to the michaelblank.com/IRA.
We'll keep you updated.
Yeah. Okay. Just michaelblank.com/IRA. And I'll have John's schedule there updated as it goes along. I think you have another one, someone on the West Coast.
Well, we've got one in Tampa. So it's the West Coast of Florida. We're doing one in Tampa at the end of June. I think it's the 25th and 26th, whatever that weekend is. And then I'm going to schedule one for the West Coast, but it's probably not going to be until, I haven't decided yet, September, October. I've got a few conferences I'm trying to set up out there. I try to make all this coincide. So if I speak in California in a few places, I'll probably set up a workshop around that time. But we'll do it in either Nevada, SoCal, or the Bay Area. And we'll continue to schedule them. I'll do at least 4 a year because I've been getting the signups. Whenever I market it, we do get it. I mean, it's a no-brainer because what happens is you learn at a much lower rate with a lot of great networking opportunities in the room because of the caliber of the attendees I bring in. And then do people still call me to do, to hire me to do services? Yeah, but it's a much smaller amount of time because the questions are usually much smaller, more specific. Some of the questions were already answered in the workshop. So oftentimes it'll be things like, John, we've implemented a structure based on what you discussed. Would you review the structure? Here's the paperwork, yada, yada. Go through it. Mike, what is the deal? I forgot. Do you have it there? What is the deal we're offering? Because we're going to offer.
I think. Yeah, you
study course.
Yeah, you really, if you buy them together, so separately, if you buy them separately, the course and the boot camp it's just under $2,400. And you're making the two available together for $1,197. So that comes with 2 tickets to the live event, and I'm sure people can choose whichever they want throughout the year, and as well as the home study course, which just comes with 12 hours of audio. So I think that's just the deal that you wanted to make available is $1,197 for both.
Now it's question time.
And to get that deal is again the michaelblank.com/IRA. So you can actually hop on there right now and go through the process and get that reserved for 2 tickets and get the home study course. And it's a lot more of what John already talked about here. So it's the michaelblank.com/IRA. So take advantage of that. I'm not sure how long it'll be up there. So do that now or in the next couple hours as soon as possible. And with that, there's a few questions, so go ahead and type in your questions. There, let's see, one of them asked, John, can you transfer money from a traditional IRA to a self-directed IRA or a self-directed 401k? Can it be transferred into a self-directed account? So,
okay, let me answer it in pieces. You can transfer from a regular IRA to a self-directed IRA or to a self-directed Roth IRA. That's not a problem. Now, if you transfer to the self-directed Roth, you're obviously paying the tax on the transfer. If you transfer to regular IRA to regular IRA, then it's not a problem. Excuse me. From the 401k, and IRAs transfer to 401ks as well, except for the Roth. So let me clarify. If I have a self-directed IRA, if I have a normal IRA, traditional normal IRA, I can transfer it to a self-directed IRA, a self-directed Roth. I can transfer it to a self-directed 401k. If I have a Roth IRA that's normal, I can transfer it to a self-directed Roth IRA, and that's pretty much it. So there's a quirk in the rules where I cannot transfer a self-directed Roth IRA to a self-directed Roth 401k, because a lot of people don't know you can have a Roth 401k. And then if you have 401k money that's regular, not self-directed, it'll transfer to in the case of a traditional 401k, can transfer to a regular self-directed 401k or to a traditional self-directed IRA, to either one. If you have a 401k Roth, you can transfer it to a self-directed 401k Roth or to a self-directed Roth IRA. So the only one that doesn't transfer is a Roth IRA cannot be transferred to a Roth 401k. Pretty much everything else transfers.
That's right. So Mike is asking, what if my 401k is at my current full-time job? Can I transfer that money into a self-directed 401k?
Theoretically possible, extraordinarily unlikely. In other words, the law doesn't prohibit it, but usually the plan document, 999 times out of 1,000 at your normal job, the plan document will not allow you to go from the 401k to anything self-directed. Because theoretically, your employer, I work for Microsoft, let's say, which would be a nightmare for everybody. Well, I don't know. Could it get any worse? Probably not.
I don't know.
Maybe.
You probably would sabotage them somehow.
The bottom line is, could Microsoft set up self-directed accounts? They could, they don't. Now, can you transfer the 401k completely outside of Microsoft if that's where you work for your W-2? Not until you leave the company. So your 401k at the company, but can you have, so let's say you work at Microsoft and you have a flipping business, just to give one example. Can I have my Microsoft 401k and set up another 401k at my side gig, my flipping business, for example? Sure. And maybe what I do is I contribute to the Microsoft 401k to get the match, and everything beyond the match, I contribute outside of my Microsoft job to my side thing, the rest of it to that 401k. So I can grow two 401ks at the same time. The total amount I can contribute doesn't go up. So my contribution limit applies to both together.
Right. Okay, good. So Donna is asking, hey, can I pay for the training out of the self-directed IRA?
I wouldn't recommend it. Theoretically possible, I wouldn't do it. And that's, I know it could hurt me. There's some of you who want to pay for the training out of your IRA, and it would help me sell. And I know people who sell on that basis. I think it's dishonest. I think that there are some subtle risks with doing that. I just wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Sorry, gosh, an honest lawyer. They got to probably just bar me.
What's wrong with you? Yeah, no, that's awesome. I appreciate that. Can you purchase a property in a 401k and sell to a nephew? Straight flip, no rehab.
Okay, I missed that. Let me scroll and see if I can find it. Or you can repeat that.
Yeah, can you purchase a property in a 401k, or I assume any kind of IRA, and then sell to a nephew, a straight flip, no rehab? Apparently, you're not touching it. You're just reselling it.
Can you sell to the nephew as long as you demonstrate there's no personal benefit to you? In other words, he's not a prohibited party. Yeah, you can sell to him, but you got to show that you didn't cut him a special deal. You got to show that it was pretty much a market deal, what you could have sold to anyone else for. Otherwise, you're doing a nephew a favor with your IRA or 401k money, and that would be viewed by the IRS as a benefit to you personally.
Right. Okay. Sai is asking, so if we're buying multifamily properties, normally we buy those in separate LLCs. Now, if we do that, she's asking, should we have a separate IRA per property?
It depends on size. You got a couple of issues there, some complexity. First of all, remember, an IRA and a 401k do not provide you with asset protection. In other words, if somebody trips and falls on the apartment building the IRA owns, can you still be sued personally? Sure. So the first thing is you probably do want to get an LLC in there, but you only do that for properties that are large enough, because the issue is these checkbook LLCs, most of what's sold out there is garbage. Most of the time they have you manage it yourself. Most of the time it's a template by someone who has no idea what they're doing. I charge a fair penny. I usually charge around $2,500 for checkbook LLCs, but I also spend some time going through it with you. If you go to the class, the workshop, I actually discount the $2,500 by $1,000. Why? I don't have to spend nearly as much time on the LLC because you already have a great idea of what you're doing. So the question becomes, is the property large enough, first of all, to afford its own LLC? And then should you have things in separate IRAs? If the properties are big enough, it can't hurt. In other words, IRAs, self-directed IRAs, are getting cheap enough now. If you have real money in it, and let's say one of them blows up, somebody made a mistake, there's a prohibited transaction, it blows one IRA up, do you want to protect the other IRAs? Yes. Now, if it's 401ks, I'm not so concerned. Why? Because a prohibited transaction doesn't blow up the 401k. So I still want to have an LLC for the same reason that you would have an LLC instead of putting it in your personal name if you're doing the deal outside of a 401k. So the LLC issue still exists, But if I have a 401k and there's a prohibited transaction in it, it doesn't blow it up. There's just a penalty. So long answer, bottom line is it depends. Size matters greatly. But with decent sized apartment buildings, yeah, I would have a separate IRA or HSA or CISA. And yeah, I would have a separate LLC. If we had 401ks, I'd probably only have the separate LLC.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. Someone's asking, I withdrew money from a Roth IRA in 2015 for a deal. Now, he says, I understand that since the Roth IRA was established more than 5 years ago, that were converted in or before the 5th year, will it not be subject to a 10% penalty? I don't quite understand this sentence.
Okay, yeah, they're mixing a bunch of rules, and that's easy to do because there are a ton of rules that are easy to mix up. They're mixing 3 different rules. When you make a contribution to a Roth IRA, the contribution can always be withdrawn tax-free. So if I put in $5,000, go do one of these rental deals, no longer need the $5,000 and pull it out of my Roth, the contribution always comes out tax-free. To take money out of a Roth IRA tax-free otherwise, you have to have a Roth in existence for 5 years, and you have to be 59 and a half or older, or you have to have inherited the Roth IRA. There's an exception that if, let's say I'm 8 years old, actually I kind of act like it, so it fits. If I'm 8 years old and I inherit a Roth IRA, I can start pulling money out of it tax-free from day one. So if you have a relative who's in bad health or really old and hates the government, arrange to inherit a Roth, even a little one with $500 in it that you could grow. You could get the money tax-free out of the inherited Roth from day one.
Cool. Awesome. Looks like we are out of questions here, which is awesome because we're almost up to an hour. So this has been great. Cool. Again, if you want to go to one of John's live events, again, go to themichaelblanc.com/IRA, and there's schedules on there. All right. So take advantage of that. That is just really good content. I don't think there's anything similar out there. So I appreciate you putting that together because it certainly opened up my eyes. And, getting this wrong can cost you a lot more than, the $1,000 or something that you're charging for the live event. So that's really been awesome. Listen, I appreciate you guys on this call. And John, thank you very much for your time.
Glad to be here. Any way I can legally and ethically stick it to the man, I'm happy to do.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Talk to you later.